There'll be the kids' Sunday school as well. God's blessings on our time this morning. You're going to get in trouble. Oh, no. Hey, bud. All right, good morning, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. You can stay up here, but Daddy has to teach, okay? So, for this morning, we are going to be going into continuing into chapter 5. Make sure to tell all of your friends that we are... Anyway, so we're going into chapter 5. Make sure to tell your friends. We will probably be wrapping up next week and then possibly doing something on Easter morning with it, as well as a possible summary to all of this. But where I want to start with this week is a quote from the book from Pastor Jeff Leiniger. Think again about the faces, places, and spaces of your life. The people you daily encounter, the settings of home, school, work, neighborhood, and planet, the offices you occupy, or the roles you are given. How many arose from your own personal volition? In retrospect, very few indeed. Most of our callings we don't choose, and even the ones we do choose, seldom turn out the way we expected. So what I'm really getting into as we start this, going back into the chapter today, is really talking about how when we look at each vocation and calling in our life, that first off, all of them are important, and second off, a lot of them, yeah, they're given from, or some of them that we choose for ourselves, but then there are others that we don't choose, that some are just given by God. And even if we want to get into it, there's that kind of gray area in between of those where, and a lot of them I think can really be about like our job, that, yeah, we do pick our job, but it's still God-given, that we go, yeah, I want to work here, or I want to do this, but still God giving you that calling. For this morning, when I was preparing, I really started to think about this for my own life. And not only was I thinking about this, but I also started wanting to thinking about, well, how often am I doing these different callings in life? How often am I, especially that line, the people you daily encounter, the settings, home, school, work, neighborhood, and planet, the offices you occupy, or the roles you've given. I wanted to really think about where I was spending my time in my vocations and callings on a daily basis. No, you stay over there. I'm not having you trip again. Yep, I see that big bump, Eli. I know, that was Daddy's fault. So, I decided that it can be a little dangerous for a pastor to reveal what he's spending his time on a daily basis. But I feel like for this topic, it'd be a good idea just to show, like, for me, what I did on a regular day. I went back and thought about my Thursday. This is kind of the time I spent on Thursday. I really had to think about it because it was fascinating, because I started to break it down of how much time did I spend in this vocation and that vocation, and then how much time did I really spend outside of my vocations. So on Thursday, I'd probably say I spent about 5 hours directly being a dad, meaning Eli was around me, I was providing for him, caring for him. Since Jody has to work at 6:30 in the morning, Thursday was one of those mornings where I took Eli to school, so I got to get him up. I got to give him his milk, change his clothes, change the diaper. And no, before you ask, this does not actually equal up an entire day. I saw Laura Pollard just over there just going, reading? Okay. Then the next one, I spent 6 hours directly being a husband, meaning that Jody was, in my vicinity. I was fulfilling my vocation as a husband. So, I mean, in that moment, like, yeah, there were a couple hours that I was doing two different vocations. I was being a dad and a husband. Um, I'd probably say I spent 8 hours directly doing pastoral duties, whether that was meeting with someone or leading a Bible study or preparing. Or if you want to check out the website's starting to look really good. Um, Definitely worked on a little on that this week. So, and then I thought about it. I probably spent 15 minutes practicing my putting because if you don't practice putting, you're not going to be good at it. I'm probably not good at it anyway, but oh well. 30 minutes reading a book, and probably an hour. That's probably a low balling it. An hour on social media watching some form of TV. And while I was looking at my day, I found it very interesting for the fact that um, that this chart I made isn't always going to look like it's not always going to be. This is only my Thursday. If I would have done the same thing for yesterday, it would have looked a lot different because there was a Saturday. While yes, I don't stop being a pastor on Saturdays, I wasn't doing any pastoral duties besides maybe getting this Bible study ready. Um, but then I spent time not only being a father and a husband, but I also spent time yesterday being a son as my dad came down for my birthday. So this is only a glimpse of like one day of my life. But in this glimpse, it was interesting because I started thinking about all the places I went in my vocation, all the people. I say like in my vocation here, I have Jody as a pastor. I interacted with many different people in multiple different places. As a dad, at home with Eli or at school. And then that last part is kind of the time that I would say, well, I wasn't really fulfilling a vocation. I still had my vocations with me. I would encourage you all to do this some point in your week. To just go, even if you just write it down, just kind of think about how much time are you spending in each vocation. Not to challenge, okay, you got to spend this much time in this vocation and that much time, but I really think it's a great exercise because it helps us focus on where we are fulfilling our vocations at, who we are fulfilling our vocations with, and how much time in our day we are spending inside of our vocations. Because really, if we wanted to get down to it, we spend time in our vocations 24 hours a day. But this, I really do think it's a great reminder on that. Just because that you might spend 30 minutes in a vocation, you might spend 10 hours. That doesn't change the importance of each vocation God has given you in your life. Now, I want to ask a couple questions. And this really comes from the quote from Pastor Leiniger. And I want to get that distinction between the vocations that we have been given, or the vocations that we chose, and the vocations that we did not choose. For an example, from my own experience, like I chose to propose to Jody. Jody proposed to say yes, or she chose to say yes to my proposal. That's a vocation that we both chose. We didn't choose to have, or we didn't choose Eli. That was God giving us a blessing. So I didn't choose to Eli or the vocation of a father. But then if you want to even break it down, I wanted to be a pastor, but God gave me this vocation of being a pastor here at Redeemer. So I think you can really identify in your life what are those vocations you have been given, and what are the ones that you've chosen. What are the positives of callings that we did not pick? I'll give you that for a second. In your life, what are the positives of having callings that we didn't have any choosing? Well, they all really work together because every vocation and every relationship we have should be centered on God. Um, I I mean, God should be first in our life, but each vocation should point us back to God. Each calling we have should point us back to God. But what are the positives of the callings that we did not choose for our life? Hmm. Yeah, and we'll actually talk about that point of the fact that humanity, um, with God, we are capable of many different things, and a lot of times things that we did not realize we could ever do in our life. And yeah, when we're given a vocation that we did not expect to have, that's where, and we'll talk about that. We have to rely on God's strength to make us through instead of relying on ourselves, which is a wonderful thing. Are there any other positives you may think of? Yeah. Uh huh. And I think that part of not knowing is the blessing in that because you don't try to manipulate or control it your way. You just are kind of you not placed in, but you definitely have to rely on God more when you don't really know what you're getting into. It's the uncertainty which can easily be a positive. What about negatives? What are negatives of callings that we didn't pick? Resentment, porque. So it can easily lead to resentment if we do not appreciate the calling we've been given. Good. What else? Stress. Explain, Nicholas. Very true. How many times in our lives that, yeah, exactly, where we think we know what we're getting into, but then situations arise where we have to, um, where it'll cause stress because we never expected to have to do anything like that. Yeah. Moving then to the or the callings that we do pick in life. What are the positives of that? What are the positives of choosing a vocation in your life, i.e., getting married or um, jobs or whatnot? Yeah, I mean that's a big thing. We are very much a achievement-driven humanity that we love to the things that we put our mind to it. We love to accomplish that. If I mean, be honest with yourselves. If it was good to succeed in the job that you want in life, correct? And even if you're retired in those hobbies or the volunteer hours that you do, the success in those brings joy, does it not? It's okay to say yes. There's nothing wrong with that. You want to be able to succeed in what you do, and that is a blessing. What's another positive? Yes. A lot of times in the things that you want to do, the callings that you have, you're going to be passionate and you pray that you're successful and you are able to get the financial security from that. Because, you know, let's be honest again. We live in a very money market driven world. That and now, just because you have more money doesn't mean you don't have less problems, but how many people do struggle with financial situations in life? What are some of the negatives of the callings that you pick? You know, yeah, you pick it and then you go into it. You go, oh, I don't like. I thought I would like this. I don't like it. Yeah, that's always a worry. That the callings that you are given, that if you don't like them, you struggle, you burden with it. But at least you didn't pick it yourself. Those that you're given, when you have the same things, you have also easily could have resentment of the fact knowing I wanted to do this and I'm struggling with it. What's another negative we could bring? I have one, but I would love to hear another from all of you. Time away from, yes. That's where we're connecting back to earlier in the book when when the callings that we pick in life, it is very easy to fall into the trap of going, well, this is what I want to do with my life, so I'm going to spend the most time focusing in on that. And then one I was also thinking of is that what happens if you have a crisis in that calling that you picked in life? Going, is this really what God wanted me to do? Is this something I'm really enjoying? There are positives and negatives of every single calling that we have in life. But through this, I pray that we understand that even in the midst of both of these positives and negatives, the callings that you have received in life are from God, and that they are good, they are noble, they are truly wonderful, and that when we fulfill our vocations, whether they've been given to us or we have picked them ourselves, that we serve as Christians faithfully in them when we just serve faithfully in them. What a joy that is to remember and to know. And just a point I have, whether or not we picked our callings, they came from God. And we are called to serve in them faithfully. And we will benefit in our lives by serving in them faithfully. It's such the major difference that we have in our Lutheran faith compared to other Christian denominations. Especially, and a lot of this I think flows even from faith. How are we saved? Pastor Correa talks about the resurrection today in his sermon, and it boils down to the question, how do we know that we are saved? How do we know that we're going to heaven? Well, for us Lutherans, we have no doubt. When Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. When Paul says baptism now saves you, we have assurance that through our baptism we are already saved. I even had this conversation, Jody and I were having it with my step-family yesterday, and my stepsister said something that is definitely an absolute no-no for us Lutherans. And she was talking about how do you read the Bible? How do you learn from the Bible? And she said, well, you people, Lutherans, you read it literally. At which point I'd say, yes. How else would you read the Bible but literally? Obviously, we don't read Leviticus saying we have to fulfill the laws of the nation of Israel because we fulfill the laws of the United States of America. But yeah, when Jesus says, do this in remembrance of me, this is my body, yeah, we go, yeah, it's probably good to listen to what Jesus actually said. But then she said something interesting. She said, well, we being non-denominationalists, we try to read between the lines. At which point I said, good luck with that, because that's when you're trying to go, okay, I made this point to Jesus in the car. I'll admit I was being a little mean because I was making fun of my stepsister. But I really just wanted to go to her. Well, okay, please tell us. What did Jesus... You what? No. I said to Jody in the car. I said to Jody in the car. It's like... it's something like, well, Jesus, you actually said this, but what did you really mean? How how important is it to remember the fact that our theology and our faith is important because of the fact that if we are so focused on how are we saved, how is Jesus working in our lives, we get caught up in the fact that Jesus has already done the work, and now we are supposed to go and serve faithfully with our neighbors, as we've talked about for the past couple months. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, Luther calls that the German or the Latin word tentatio, the trials of our lives, the temptations that we face on a daily basis. And in our vocations, that is absolutely going to happen. And all of you probably are aware of this, the fact that you are going to have trials in your life where it feels like you're just suffering, where it's painful, it is hurtful. You just want to scream out in anger and punch a tree. I say punch a tree because a lot of times in our anger we do dumb things. That I couldn't think of anything dumber than punching a tree. But in our vocations, that's where we've been talking about where we have to rely on God, where we have to pray to our God and give all of that to Him. Now, I'm not going to have a ton of time to talk about it today. I got 7 minutes left, but that's okay because I don't have too much left planned for today. Going into the chapter, it starts to wrap up talking about God-given callings and what are the benefits of these God-given callings. You know, we've talked about how our callings are God-given, how they're good, they're righteous, but let's talk about the benefits of the callings that we have been given in life by God. And there are 4 sacred gifts of God-given callings: value, strength, grace, and joy. And we'll try to get through the first 2 today. My child. Let's start off with value. Ponder on how many people God has brought into your life. Why would we say they are insignificant, or the timing they come into our life as inconvenient? So where the book is coming from, this is really talking about how we should not ever be ungrateful, or we should never have angst against the vocations and callings in our life because of the people that we have run into in them, the places, the experiences, the blessings that we have received from them. And those interactions and the relationships that we build, it is what shapes and molds us. Each life has value because God gave all of us value. The easiest way to explain this is that where would you be right now without the vocations that God gave you in your life? And I'm not just talking about the current ones you have. I'm talking about every single vocation that you've ever held in your life. They have shaped you. They have molded you. They have made you who you are today. And amazingly, if God is behind all those God-given callings, then God has shaped and molded you throughout your entire life. And I really want to emphasize that point about how each person has a God-given value. Because it is very easy, especially if a relationship, and I'm not talking about friendship or romantic or a relationship between coworkers or a business relationship, if those fall through, if you hold any anger or resentment against anyone in your life from that, this is the moment to remember that just because something happened does not mean that, one, that person doesn't hold value anymore, because they still do. And secondly, that you were shaped and molded. You were blessed by having them in your life when you did. An example of this, I don't think we'll be able to get through this second one. We'll just stick with this one. I want to go to Acts chapter 8 and the story of Stephen. Would somebody like to read this for us, please? Thank you. So, for the first half of this reading, it's kind of setting up the situation. Stephen, one of the first elders of the church, the first martyr of the church, he was told by God to go to this chariot of a eunuch from Ethiopia. Now, if you're wondering why an Ethiopian was in Judea at around this time, well, first off, God placed this person right place, right time. But secondly, remember that Jerusalem is a hub in the Middle East. In that time of the world, if you wanted to travel anywhere between Africa and Europe and Asia, you almost had to go through Jerusalem. So this man was traveling, and where he got the books of Isaiah, who knows? But he was reading a prophecy from Isaiah, and God told Stephen, go and talk to him. Go and help him. Go and join this chariot. Now, it's easy. It could have been easy at the time of the world because Jews really looked down on those who are not Jewish. Philip, from a Jewish background, now a Christian, he could have easily stuck up his nose at this Ethiopian because he was not one of God's anointed people. But yet, Philip sees God and Philip see value in this man, and they go over and talk to him. Would somebody else like to read the rest of this? Jody, would you please read? Eunuch. Zero. I didn't even say it right. Thank you, Jode. Real quickly, because we're out of time. What a wonderful example of how Philip, who this eunuch never saw again in his life, impacted this man. How Philip, just by explaining, because the Isaiah prophecy was talking about him who would die and rise again for forgiveness of sins. And this eunuch goes, okay, who is this? And Philip goes, this is Jesus, whom the Jews persecuted and killed, but he rose from the dead for our salvation, and who is fully God and fully man. And the eunuch goes, all right, I want to be baptized. Can we go down to that river right now and be baptized? And they did. What a joyful moment. Each person in our lives have God-given value. Whether it's the cashier at the grocery store. Granted, there's one of those cashiers at the grocery store. He's just very mean to me at this small JC. His name is Caleb Brown. If you see him, you just need to tell him he's a mean cashier to his pastor. No, I enjoy when I run into Caleb and Colton over there. But even just at the grocery store, all the people that you pass by, you're passing by them in your vocation. Every time you drive, you're passing by people in your vocation, in your work, in your families. Each person has value in life, and we should honor that and recognize that in our callings. What a joyful gift that each and every one of us has value in our Lord's eyes, and that we should hold that same value for others. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions as we wrap up? Well, let me do the benediction then. Receive the benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. Amen. God's blessings, everyone. Have a wonderful time in worship if you have not gone, and if you have had, God's blessings on the rest of your week.